Good evening, Penn Staters, and thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's virtual speaker session. As a reminder, tonight's discussion is being recorded. This evening, we have a great group of panelists who we'll be hearing from throughout the next hour. We welcome the entrepreneurs of Invent Penn State, along with a few university leaders on innovation and research. Today's discussion is the latest installment of a recurring series of virtual programming that the Alumni Association is bringing to the Penn State community. We'll be speaking with experts, university leaders, and other Penn Staters who will share insights, perspectives with you in the coming weeks and months. Additionally, the Alumni Association offers a host of online networking events, career programs, and webinars. You can find a full list of all of our virtual events at alumni.psu.edu/events. First, I'm thrilled to welcome Laura Weiss. Laura is the Senior Vice President for Research at Penn State. Dr. Weiss was appointed to her position in September of last year, and in this role, she provides strategic, technical, and administrative leadership to advance Penn State's research enterprise with an annual expenditure consistently exceeding $900 million, including an all-time high of $927 million in 2017 and 2018. Dr. Weiss, thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Provide some insight and perspective into the university's research strategy.
Thank you, Paul. I'm delighted to be here. So I am the Senior Vice President for Research. I'm Laura Weiss, and I am an alum as well. So for those of you who don't know, I received my PhD here, but that was a while ago, last century. I'm here to share with you some of our research activities, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to stay for all of the question and answer sessions, but you have terrific representations from others, so they'll be able to garner them, collect all your inputs, and they can then share the questions with me, and we can get back to you offline. So this picture here is a picture of a coronavirus. If you haven't seen one, this was from the first US patient, and those little blue dots are the actual virus. But I'm going to start talking a little bit about some of our research and research observations that we have going on here at Penn State. So first off, many of you, since you're alum, you know, we have more than 45,000 students on main campus and nearly 100,000 students across all of our campus. We are really deep and broad in our work. We have a major Department of Defense, university-affiliated research laboratory that's doing some really impressive work for the Navy on our campus. We have a medical school, and as you heard, we have a major research focus. With last year, we actually hit a new all-time high of $968 million of annual expenditures. We are ranked #1 in the number of research areas that are ranked by the National Science Foundation. They rank universities in 32 different areas, and we have the most that are ranked in the top 10. So we have 18 of our research areas are ranked in the top 10, whereas our other universities have less than 18. This says that we are very broad and deep and excellent. So you ought to be proud that you've come from, or I'm sure you are, a research institution that is really has such breadth, because this lets us do a lot of interdisciplinary research. Part of our vision is to make sure that our research will now, more than ever before, have a transformative impact on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the nation, the world, society as a whole, and the condition of our planet. We do everything from fundamental discovery through innovative applications, economic development, and national security. Today, as you hear from Invent Penn State and some of the startup companies, you will hear how we've taken innovative applications through the economic development process. I do want to highlight, though, what have we been doing for the past 2 months, 3 months now, when coronavirus hit. And this is really going to highlight some of the nimbleness and the agility that our researchers had. And by having that kind of breadth and depth and excellence that I just talked about, you'll get to see what we've been able to accomplish really quickly. In February, we became the first US university to sign on to the Wellcome Trust Statement for providing immediate open access to research findings related to COVID-19. And then a few weeks later, our Huck Institutes of Life Sciences and supported by the Huck Family Endowment, we launched seed funding for coronavirus research projects. By having this endowment, we were very much able to be nimble and then pivot to some of these seed projects that if we had to wait for federal sponsorship, we never would have been able to jump in quite as quickly. So we invested more than $2 million and funded more than 47 teams. And this is one example of just one of those research projects. Paul Kramer from chemistry, he is developing sensors to detect coronavirus in enclosed spaces. These are inexpensive real-time sensors that can do continuous monitoring. And the point is to be able to identify that there's the virus is there before others become infected. Then we had some grassroots engagement. We had a group called MASC. MASC stands for Manufacturing and Sterilization for COVID. And here we had donors, community members, and researchers come together and start manufacturing very nimbly 3D printed masks. These are masks for coronavirus, the N95 masks. We were sterilizing those masks using a technique called vaporized hydrogen peroxide. And then in the bottom picture down here, you can see these stethoscopes. When we found out that the Hershey Medical Center, Penn State Health, was having a shortage of disposable stethoscopes, we started 3D printing stethoscopes for them. You can find out more here at the MASC, www.masc.psu.edu. This is a grassroots group of more than 300 people, and I call them my masked marvels because they really are doing some tremendous work. We also then, when coronavirus started hitting, we realized that our healthcare workers that are on the front line needed more of the personal protective equipment, or what's called PPEs. We went and scoured our laboratories and said, what do we have that we can donate to these frontline healthcare workers? And we ended up donating more than 10,000 pieces of PPEs to Mount Nittany Medical Center, Hershey Medical Center, the University Health Services, and our Commonwealth campuses did the same thing, where they gathered their supplies and donated them to their local hospitals as well. On the front lines, we have Penn State Health Hospital is right on the front lines, and they are now using plasma from recovered patients to explore possible treatment for COVID-19. The Hershey Medical Center also joined a clinical trial evaluating the antiviral drug called remdesivir. Then we started looking at some of our additional interdisciplinary strengths, and we had our College of Engineering and our College of Arts and Architecture team up to design this box that's up on the top right. And we call it a glove box nursing booth. And this booth, the healthcare worker stands inside of it. It has 2 holes for them to put their hand through, and then they can start taking tests, nasal swabs, temperature, of any individual on the other side of the booth. It protects our healthcare workers, and it protects the individuals as well. And we've already deployed some of these out to various locations. And again, another one of our designs, just innovation at work. And finally, if you want to hear some of the other activities we have underway, we launched a video outreach series to answer a lot of questions, basic questions about the pandemic. And you can go to www.asksid.psu.edu. SID stands for the Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics. And we have a whole group just looking at that research, from epidemiology to the fundamental biology to the social sciences and behavior that goes along with living in the times during a pandemic. So these are just a very few snippets of some of the highlights that we have going on with coronavirus. And we did all of these activities, these results that you're seeing, these 47 seed grants, and we did all of them in less than 2 months. So when you start hearing about the rest of the evening about the innovations and advances that are coming out from Penn State and how these things are spinning out into companies and startups, you'll see a lot of the same theme of nimbleness, flexibility, driven by a mission, passion, coupled with that innovation and the ability to make a difference for our society. And so as a fellow alum, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight and listening to everyone. Again, please share your questions with Paul, and we'll make sure that I'm able to get back to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Dr. Weiss. We appreciate your time. And like Dr. Weiss said, send us your questions. We will make sure that they get to her. A good question might be, is this the year we crossed the $1 billion mark in research funding at Penn State?
We sure hope so, but I'll tell you, our faculty took a lot of time pivoting to teach remotely. So if we don't quite hit it, we're going to be close and we'll get there. I'm not worried about getting there. But I did want to give our faculty a break from, if constantly having their foot on the gas moving forward. They had family to take care of, they have pets to take care of, they had to pivot to remote teaching. So if they slow down a little bit on the research, we'll cut them a break and we'll get there next year.
We are on the verge of $1 billion research enterprise, and Dr. Weiss will take us there in the coming years. Next, I'm happy to welcome Dr. James Delatre, the Associate Vice President for Research and the Director in the Office of Entrepreneurship and Commercialization. Prior to joining Penn State, Dr. Delatre served as the Vice President of Global Marketing at Nano Horizons, a nanomaterials manufacturing startup company spun out of Penn State. Dr. Delatre will provide an overview of Invent Penn State and the impact it has across the Commonwealth. Thanks for joining us tonight, James.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you to the Alumni Association for inviting me to share an update on Invent Penn State today. The university obviously has many important priorities and programs, so this is truly an honor. I'd also like to thank our guest entrepreneurs. They are incredibly busy with their startups, as you can imagine, but are always generous in sharing their time and stories with the Penn State community. So thank you to you all. So as a refresher, Invent Penn State was launched in 2015 by President Eric Barron. Shortly before he started off his presidency, he visited our 20+ Commonwealth campus communities and met with chancellors and local leaders, many of whom were dealing with decades of economic stagnation or decline. Through that listening tour, President Barron committed to be a driver of revitalization in Pennsylvania and created a vision of leveraging Penn State's immense resources, including the research enterprise that you just heard about, industry partnerships, student talent, and our unmatched alumni network to spur economic development, job creation, and student career success across our statewide footprint. He saw it as a reimagining of the land-grant mission in the 21st century, building upon Penn State's longstanding support of agriculture to support creative businesses of all types. Since 2015, Invent Penn State has developed numerous accelerator programs, tools, events, and funding sources that help faculty, students, and community innovators to start and grow businesses. You can find more about these programs and hundreds of entrepreneur success stories at invent.psu.edu. One of the most visible programs has been our Innovation Hub Seed Grant program, which enabled the creation of 21 innovation hubs in our campus communities across Pennsylvania. Most of the innovation hubs are called LaunchBoxes. They offer no-cost co-working space accelerator programs that help de-risk business concepts and mentorship for early-stage entrepreneurs. Each innovation hub is customized to meet its local community needs, ranging from 3D printing and prototyping services to marketing workshops to no-cost legal advice through Penn State Law's Entrepreneurship Assistance Clinic. Since 2015, the hubs have galvanized their communities around innovation and provided a massive network of services. Since 2016, Penn State's innovation hubs have assisted over 2,500 entrepreneurs, graduated over 250 startups from their accelerator programs, completed 200 product development projects, and engaged over 7,000 students and faculty. We're also beginning to see job creation with 150 jobs created in Pennsylvania so far. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we certainly understand that Pennsylvanians will need these type of entrepreneurial services more than ever. And while the innovation hubs were conceived to be in-person gathering places for the innovation community, the hubs quickly and nimbly pivoted to provide most of their programming online and to support entrepreneurs in this new socially distanced world. So even in June, which has traditionally been a relatively quiet month for university activity, the hubs have been extremely busy. To learn more about these resources for entrepreneurs, please check out the Invent Penn State Resource Navigator at resourcenavigator.psu.edu. So this year we celebrated another very exciting milestone for the Invent Penn State initiative when construction of our new $52 million state-of-the-art innovation center began in downtown State College. So this is Penn State's first new construction in the downtown and will be a bridge to the State College startup community. The facility will be the new home of the Happy Valley LaunchBox powered by PNC Bank, as well as the home of a 13,000 square foot metalworking and woodworking makerspace, a digital makerspace and virtual reality lab, and ample networking and meeting space. The new innovation hub will be open to Central Pennsylvania community members and alumni from all over, but will have a statewide impact through shared programming with the LaunchBox network. We're currently fundraising to support these innovation programs and are seeking to partner with alumni, parents, friends, community and business leaders looking to pay forward the rewards of entrepreneurship to future generations through philanthropy. So mindful of time, I'd like to invite you to engage with us. Whether you're an entrepreneur in need of startup support, have time and talent to mentor a startup company, can provide internships to innovative students, or would like to support students, programs, and innovation spaces through philanthropy, please reach out either through invent.psu.edu or to Heather Winfield in Penn State's Strategic Initiatives Office. So again, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to turn the floor back to Paul.
Thanks, James. Now we're going to hear from three ambitious and impressive Penn State entrepreneurs. First up is Matt Rhoda, the Chief Marketing Officer and founder for Reflection. Matt's primary focus is on the success of Reflection's growing customers, ensuring they have the resources needed to empower their own business through service. Matt sustained a severe concussion while playing ice hockey in 2014, which in part led to the genesis of Reflection. Matt, thank you for joining us. We're eager to hear about your progress and seeing what Reflection and Penn State has played a critical component in your success.
Thank you very much, Paul. Let's see, I'm trying to get my video started here. There we go. All right, should be all set then. So thanks everybody. I'm really excited to tell you a little bit more about Reflection and especially everything that we've been up to over the last 2 years. Lots has gone on, but I thought that we could start out just by a little bit of a reminder as to what Reflection is. So you may remember if you were at the City Lights tour that happened in 2018, I brought with me this 2x6 foot LED touchscreen, a big flashy thing. And you may recall that what we've done with it is used it as a way to take existing neuroscience and have it be a method to very portably, because it collapses like an accordion, as you can see here, but also very precisely measure and train brain skills. So using this and having lights and patterns appear, we can measure things like reaction time, decision-making speed, peripheral vision. These are all very important components in brain health, and also, as I'll talk about a little bit more, brain performance. Something that really stands out about Reflection's history, and you may recall, is actually our genesis story. Now, this isn't a picture of me, but what we did get started after I suffered a very severe concussion playing ice hockey, where it was one of those instances that I had months of headaches and vision problems, and it set us off on this path as to how athletics views brain health and views brain performance, and really what we could do about it as a company. So we started out really focusing on that concussion piece of it, since it was tied to my injury. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today as a takeaway is how we've been able to listen to the market and pivot. And I thought that this would be particularly relevant, especially now, just that, everyone talks about how this is unprecedented times. And it certainly is. And one of the advantages of a startup is being able to pivot and adjust where your resources go. But it's also this balance of making sure that you're laser focused and focused on the right things. But the first area to really touch on is how we shifted away from concussion testing. And how that's still a part of what we do, or this general category of brain health and in rehabilitation. But talking with a lot of athletes and stakeholders in the athletic space, recognizing that it's certainly true that athletes care about concussion. They want to monitor that and watch out for it, but they really care about winning. And I don't think anyone's shocked to hear that. But recognizing that reflection with the technology that we've been able to develop actually has the ability to improve those very same skills that we were measuring for concussions. So being able to offer this as a system to improve reaction time, improve decision-making speed, peripheral vision, aspects of brain function, because everyone knows it's not just the biggest, strongest person on the field that's going to be the best player. Yet at the same time, how are we training things outside of weights and speed and agility? So that's something that we've really been able to touch on and grow into, is this the sports performance category in space of selling to performance gyms or to even directly to athletes, to work with them to improve their cognitive skills, ultimately helping them win more games and being a better player on the field. Another really important area, though, that I think is worth talking about as to what we saw in the market and how we were able to pivot from it, is reflection as a service. It's easy to look at us as a hardware company or as a company that sells hardware and say it's like buying a treadmill or buying a washing machine. You can get the technology and that's what you have. But we realize that nothing else out there in this space or even category really is offering this as a service, much in the same way that Peloton is offering training classes as a service. And that reflection, what we can actually tie this to is, rather than having just a piece of equipment, which, we don't like selling. We don't like the fact that we have hardware. We're really all about software and data, and we know that's where our value is, but we do it because it's very important for peripheral vision and something called functional movement. But being able to offer this as a service with a monthly subscription where we can constantly update the drills, change them, have them evolve, and even make our data smarter, like adding normative data and adding categories for you to be able to view, with even things like badges, personal bests, leaderboards. Being able to offer this as a service completely changes how Reflection operates as a business, and really our value, ultimately our value proposition to our customers. But then also, I wanted to talk about something that's been very recent for us and something that we've done in the wake of COVID, which is introducing the Flex. So I just talked about how hardware, it's really a necessity of what we do, that it's very important to be able to measure peripheral vision and other components that require physical space instead of just something like an iPad or phone. But we were able to utilize existing technology, or this 55-inch touchscreen display. As the technology has gotten better over the last couple of years, it's now at the point where we can offer this as an at-home training product. So, everyone's stuck at home, everyone's stuck inside. Now we have the Flex, as opposed to before it was just the Edge, which was, it was used solely for training. And it really is the premium product here. But at this point, now we have a product that you can put on the wall, have it really blend in pretty well, and then also turn to Netflix if you're not using it. Or then it's really just a way, though, to keep kids and athletes, fitness enthusiasts mentally sharp as we train those very same skills, like I mentioned before: reaction time, decision-making speed, all of that stuff. So it's been a really exciting couple of years for Reflection, the past 2 years, but then also the past 2 months when we've actually launched this product and done everything for it. It's been a whirlwind, as I'm sure you can imagine, but I'm certainly very excited to see how this continues to develop and how we grow into this space and continue to pivot for the best of the company. But that's everything I wanted to talk about today. So if anyone has any questions and everything, feel free to mention it in the chat and everything, but I appreciate your time and just listening to everything Reflection's been up to. But and if you're interested in purchasing the Flex, go to www.reflection.co. Gotta throw that in there. How can you not? But anyways, thanks everybody. I'll pass it back to you, Paul.
All right, Matt, thank you for that update. Next up is Hunter Swisher. Hunter is the founder and CEO of Phospho Solutions. Hunter founded Phospho Solutions in 2016 to develop and commercialize solutions to improve efficiency of global phosphorus use. Phospho Solutions is headquartered right here in State College, Pennsylvania, and since graduating in 2016, Hunter has taken the business to new heights by attracting venture capital, expanding into international markets, and growing his team to almost a dozen full-time employees. Thanks for joining us today, Hunter. We're thrilled to hear more about your company and the growth it's seeing here in State College and beyond.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Appreciate the time here and great to get the band back together. I'm sure we're all would much rather have done this in person like last year where we can interact a little bit more with everybody on the call, but pleasure to be here. Like Paul had mentioned, I'm a 2016 graduate, the founder and CEO of Phospho, and we have a pretty big mission here to try to tackle a global phosphorus problem. So we were really founded on the belief that sustainable production and responsible use of phosphorus is going to be critical here for supporting a growing population and more specifically a growing food demand. And so we've really developed some solutions coming from a Penn State technology that we were able to license and commercialize, focused on really trying to create a more sustainable future for phosphorus use. And before I get into the problem a little bit more in depth here, I'd like to introduce myself. So I am a Penn State alumni. I graduated with a degree in plant sciences from the College of Agriculture. But I also thought it was interesting to note that I'm also a State College native. So I did have the opportunity here to go through the State High school program here, where I had the opportunity to take some pretty cool alternative classes from what your traditional high school track is that really started my interest in plant sciences. So as I started to apply for school, there was no question in my mind that being a leader in the ag industry in terms of a university, I actually didn't even apply to another school. I figured that I was going to go to Penn State here and pursue my interest in plant sciences. I was very much on a track to go get a PhD. So I was very interested in kind of the research side of things and did some undergraduate research before I ended up actually discovering a technology that was developed by one of my professors in the College of Ag. And I had a really interesting, it was a junior in college when I had this idea of really the curiosity around why this technology had not been brought to market. At that time, this was actually when President Barron came in and had launched the Invent Penn State initiative. So early on in its infancy, as well as my curiosity into kind of the world of business, I was able to start my track that was a little bit more alternative than what I was planning on when I entered college, to look at the potential to actually start a company and license and commercialize this technology. So as a junior, I had the opportunity to start taking advantage of some of these resources that Invent Penn State had popped up. So this included, I was part of one of the very first LaunchBox accelerator programs, as well as a Summer Founders recipient. So I always like to talk about the Summer Founders was one thing in my life that was absolutely game changing. It was basically a program over the summer where I was handed $10,000. And the only requirements is that you were not allowed to get a job, take classes, or do any internships. You had to stay in State College and focus purely on your business. And so for me, that was a huge opportunity to really, I would say, catapult what we were trying to accomplish from just being an idea in a classroom to a reality. So through that, we were able to take advantage of a lot of the resources that were out of that LaunchBox ecosystem, like some IP law clinics and some business law clinics where we could form a corporation, start to look at, creating a company that was fundable and start hiring some early employees. And then through that, was able to tap into the Ben Franklin Technology Partner Network, where we went through, and actually Don, who you'll hear from next, was actually he was the leader of the accelerator program that I went through there. So we were able to essentially I came out of college in 2016 with a company, a few employees, a few $100,000 in investment, and sprinting, for a lack of a better term, towards trying to make this dream a reality. So since graduation, we've really started to scale. Last year, we came on board and we're talking about our fundraising efforts. And since that, a year ago, we were able to successfully raise some venture capital. So we brought in $1.5 million from actually co-led by a local group here called 1855 Capital, which has come up through this ecosystem to help fund and cater to some of the startup companies that are coming through the university, as well as we were able to bring in a $9 billion publicly traded fertilizer company, and their corporate venture arm had co-led that round as well. And now as we're moving forward, we're almost up to 12 employees and actually actively out raising a $5 million round that we hope to close here before the end of the summer. So at this point, we're really focused on trying to bring our technology to some larger markets. A lot of folks know us as kind of a company selling stuff to turf. And I'm going to tell you a little bit here next about kind of the problem we're solving in our path to doing so beyond turf. So really the problem as a whole, so phosphate, there's an issue at a global scale from two directions. The first is that phosphorus is a finite resource. It's something that I would say publicly is not as well known, but it's something that we're pulling out of finite reserves and using it at a pretty alarming rate. There's estimates that show that we could be running out of this resource in less than 60 years at our current depletion rates. And why that's so alarming is that it's the second largest nutrient needed for food production. So the predominant use for phosphorus out of these reserves is fertilizer. And the other side of this is that we're not using it so efficiently, and that loss ends up into our waterways, causing some pretty significant water quality concerns, not just here in the US, but globally. And it's estimated that more than 70% of our freshwater this year will experience some form of phosphorus pollution, most typically known in the form of an algal outbreak. And the numbers we like to talk about here that kind of highlight just truly how big this problem is. We will spend about $3.5 billion as a country applying phosphatic fertilizers for crop production. We'll spend over $5 billion cleaning up the effect that it has on our waterways. So not a very efficient model. And you can see here with this picture, really what this is meant to represent is that the life cycle of phosphorus is very much linear. So we will apply those finite reserves in the form of fertilizer. More than 50% of what we pull out of the mine will be used as fertilizer. And ultimately at each point throughout being applied to cropland all the way through to human consumption, there's pieces that will be lost along the way and ultimately end up into our environment. And it's estimated that more than 90% from mine to fork will be never used. So our solution is very much focused on tackling the problem from two angles. First, we sell a material that we sell as a fertilizer additive or a soil amendment. And really what that does is it's focused on enhancing the efficiency of phosphorus use. So making sure that what we do pull out of the mines and do apply to the soil, we actually make sure that most of it gets into the plant and not into the water. From the other side of the problem, and since we've licensed that technology and have further developments, we're actually focused on taking that same material and selling it as a treatment solution to capture phosphorus at points where it's being lost along its life cycle, and then ultimately bind it to the material and recycle it back into crop production as a high efficiency fertilizer. So it allows us to be cheap as a treatment solution. It allows us to recycle and create a more circular economy for phosphorus as a whole by being able to resell it as a high efficiency fertilizer. So it's a little bit of an insight here onto kind of what we're trying to accomplish here as a company. And I just wanted to kind of end this out by saying we have absolutely taken advantage of quite a few of the resources here at Penn State, and I don't think we'd be able to be as far along as we are without the support from Penn State. But most importantly here, you can find us here online. Our product line right now is called Rhizosorb, so you can reach out directly about our fertilizer additive solutions, as well as our company mission as a whole focused on the environmental solution at phospolutions.com. And Paul, thanks again for having us on here for the second year in a row. It's been a pleasure to connect with my Penn State family here and continue to tell our story.
Absolutely, Hunter. Thanks for joining us tonight. Next is Don McCandless, the CEO of Condeo Tech, LLC, the startup that has released a revolutionary biopesticide for the control and prevention of bed bugs. Aprehend launched in October of 2017. Prior to Condeo Tech, McCandless worked as the Director of Business Development for the Ben Franklin Transformation Business Services Network. He delivered critical management assistance to tech-based startups on cash management, market research, marketing strategy, corporate strategy, and accounting. Don, welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me, and thanks for getting the band back together. I guess if this is the band tour, I feel like Keith Richards going up here with all these young pups like Hunter and Matt. But
still rocking.
Yeah, we're trying. We're trying. So just to give you a little bit of a overview here, Aprehend is the name of our product, and it is a technology licensed out of Penn State's Department of Entomology and the College of Ag, and it's for the control of bed bug infestations, and it's based on a fungal spore that is sprayed in a barrier layer. In this animation, it's the green spray that's going around. In this case, it would be the baseboard in a hotel room, And anything that's colored in green is where the bed bugs would crawl across that. You see this pesky little bed bug crawling out of the bottom from the back spring, comes up and get a meal on you, who's sitting, probably sleeping on this bed, and then goes back to the harborage. So what happens is this in the upper left over here, you can see the leg of this bed bug picking up the spores, just like when you go to the beach, you get sand on your feet. And these spores then are seeds, and they are triggered to germinate by the cuticle of the bug. And then they penetrate the cuticle, take over the blood system of the bug, and it's this natural disease of insects that actually kills the bug. So it's a fascinating technology. In order to get that out of the lab and actually into the commercial market, we had to come up with both the product and the formulation, which we happen to sell in 16-ounce bottles here, as well as this whole spray kit and mechanism to deliver it in the EPA-approved application rate for the efficacy that we were able to claim in our technical dossier. So just wanted to follow up. 2 years ago when we went on this tour, we threw out these projections. The blue lines are what we predicted 2 years ago. And it's what we would call a swag, or the polite way of saying it's a guess that all entrepreneurs make with basically very little to no data. And then they do their best to go out and accomplish it. And you can see we did pretty well to exceed most of the projections until you get into this fourth quarter of last year. And then this is the first quarter of COVID world this year. But pretty happy with the way things that are going, you know, generating a couple $1 million business with 3 full-time employees and a couple part-timers is a pretty good gig if you can get it. So we're happy to continue to make that grow. But some of the recent scenarios and challenges that we had, you know, one of was last fall as we were getting ready to go into California. This is an EPA registered product, but then you have to get state by state registration, and California being California, it requires a little bit more work than some of the other states. So we were waiting and waiting and waiting. Our dossier was in and we were waiting, anticipating to get a September 2019 approval. But we had to make decisions in July to what we were going to do at the national trade show held in October, which is being held in San Diego, which would have been an ideal place to basically launch this. We had our booth with a big sign on it that said now registered in California. We had advertising scheduled to go in magazines dropped outside of all the hotel room doors. And at the last minute, as we were having record sales and trying to build up our stock level for raw materials, one of our key suppliers had manufacturing problems. And it was getting to the point where we didn't know if we were going to have product anymore to be able to deliver. So at the last minute at the California show, we had to pull back. We pulled all of the ads out of the magazines. We had to go and pull the things out of the hotel room, you know, magazines that were left outside the doors. So we kind of like lost some goodwill with customers because I had to send an announcement out to 5,000 people on our mail list saying, hey, you know, not to alarm you, but we don't want you to start buying this thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we're not able to provide it. But we should be back online. Actually, the day we got back from the trade show, we got our next shipment of product and we were back up and running. But that prevented us from hitting our targets in the fourth quarter like we anticipated. Some of the other things that we had to pivot and revise was really the spray kits. This is Frank. We called it the Franken sprayer, and Frank Jr., the first 2 sprayers that we tried to develop to come up with this. And then we started to partner with an outside company. And when you get into supply chain considerations, especially in the COVID world, when a lot of our supplies coming from the US, but we have some overseas manufacturers, and just to try and get some of these components starting back in November when things were hitting in the China supply chain, really started to impact us to be able to fulfill the demand that we were getting early this year through the first quarter and actually into the second quarter as well. So those are challenges that we came up with. Lithium-ion batteries, you know, we're not battery experts, so we had to learn that if you put a lithium-ion battery and fully charge it and put it on the shelf, and after 6 months, if it's not charged again, guess what? They can all die. So we didn't know that until we had 6 months worth of batteries on the shelf that we had to throw away. It cost us about $10,000. So valuable lessons, education costs money, but you have to be able to quickly change and adapt to these things in your supply chain and the market with the customers if you're going to try and make a successful entrepreneurial startup. So I think what's next for us, Canada, we're shipping our first product to Canada. That's our first country outside the US where we have approval, developing alternate spray mechanisms, working on a Europe dossier, and we're just trying to sell the bejesus out of things. So I think we'll get to the Q&A.
All right, Don, thank you. We will jump right into our Q&A right now and have a ask everybody to come back and share your screens, come off mute, and we'll jump into some of these questions. And I actually first want to start with you, James. Certainly 3 inspirational founders and folks working on startups here. Certainly the ecosystem that they're born out of is Invent Penn State, right? The ecosystem that you have cultivated here at Penn State. We have a number of entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who are online watching us. How would they talk through the process of going through a LaunchBox or through Invent Penn State from idea to where some of these startups are today?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great question, Paul. And one we get a lot, quite honestly. I think people understand that the university's committed to driving entrepreneurship, but what's the first step and how do you move through the system? So generally we ask people to find their local resource. So if you're near a Commonwealth campus, seek out your local innovation hub or LaunchBox. One thing that's wonderful about Penn State and completely unique to Penn State is that 96% of Pennsylvanians are within a 30-mile drive of one of our Commonwealth campuses or community LaunchBox. So we can be in contact with a huge number of people in a day, which is great. So usually there's some type of an intake process at your LaunchBox where you'd sit with someone. They would mentor you on what the best steps are for you. It might be that your idea is validated and it's time to move on to one of the more sophisticated accelerator programs. It might be that your idea is just an idea and it's time to go talk to some potential customers. And, I think most of the entrepreneurs here have been through that process of what we call customer discovery. And then as you move down that pipeline, there are events like the Invent Penn State Venture and IP Conference. So this is a conference we have every 18 months that brings venture capitalists from all across the country to State College to meet with startup companies. It's a great way to engage with the investor community on home turf. So those are the normal steps, but every pathway is different because every company is different. But there are a number of people that are seasoned that can help with that.
And if somebody's looking for that resource that they can go to either online or a way to reach out to you, where would they go to find that?
Yeah, if you go to invent.psu.edu, right on the bottom of the page, it shows contact information for the 21 innovation hubs, so they can connect with their local innovation hub if they're in Pennsylvania. If they're outside of Pennsylvania, they can contact us through the Invent Penn State page, and we're still happy to support alumni that are across the country. So we focus primarily on Pennsylvania, but if you're part of the family, you're part of the family.
You know, what's really interesting, and I want to bring the entrepreneurs into the conversation, what's really interesting is how the idea that they walk into a LaunchBox with is oftentimes not the idea that they take to market. And we actually heard the 3 entrepreneurs talk about that. So let's start with Matt Rhoda. Matt, certainly you started off as a hardware company and then made a pivot to really focusing on the software. Where did the inspiration for the pivot come? Was it through the customer research? Was it through your advisors? Was it through, how did you come about saying, okay, we started off with this idea, but now really to make this a viable company, we have to go in this direction?
It's a great question, and particularly in the instance of looking at concussions, it's as you can imagine, perhaps very complex. We could spend an hour on it easily, but one of the easiest ways to look at it was how the response we were getting from talking with athletes and stakeholders just in the athletic space, and about what they really care about, thinking on how we measure brain function and the way we're actually able to improve it. What we realized was if we actually, we'll call it, wrap the concussion testing under this idea of performance training, that athletes actually have way more buy-in, that, look, we can actually improve your reaction time and decision-making speed and peripheral vision to help you be a better player. That's going to give you an advantage. But at the same time, they're doing it to win more games. And it's also giving us a lot of data on their brain health and performance. So if I go into a coach and say, listen, I got a concussion test for you, they're going to say, okay, now I have maybe 2 athletes a year on my team who potentially could get an injury, and this is going to help them. That's a hard argument a hard case to make if you're thinking about purchasing something that costs, $10,000 plus. But if I go to the coach and say, listen, I have this performance training tool that is going to help your entire team win more games. And not only that, but it's actually going to be able to help better monitor potential brain injuries and give your team or your athletic trainers more data, doctors. That's a much easier sell, something that I care about a lot more. So that's just a little bit about the concussion side of things. From the hardware, software perspective, it really wasn't too revolutionary for us. I mean, we recognize the value in us is really our data, to be able to create this huge aggregate of what normative data looks like for brain performance in an individual, and especially in an athlete, that could have tremendous value down the road, and something we're making sure we really watch and are collecting.
Now, Hunter and Don, I'm not sure if you all faced a similar type pivot in your companies, but certainly you had a decision to make. Hunter, if I remember, when we first went on the road or maybe a year or 2 ago, the decision was around whether you actually become a manufacturing entity and a producer of the chemical, or you find somebody else to do that for you and bring it to the marketplace. So talk a little bit about that decision and how you finally landed on where you are today.
Yeah. So look, I think going back to this customer discovery conversation, there's nothing worse than building a product that nobody wants. And I think for us, the mission has always stayed the same. We're trying to solve a global phosphorus problem. But one thing that we quickly learned in the process of launching a product to market was that our customers not buying the product for the environmental benefit. Although we all, care for the environment, it comes down to making a sound business case and having some value proposition that benefits your customer. And I think for us, what we found was that, when we started launching a product to market, first off, we did take the track, Paul, of outsourcing manufacturing. I think that allowed us to stay lean and mean. But, when we launched that product to market to the turf industry, the golf course customers, professional turf industry, the homeowners, they're not buying our product because we're saving the water downstream. It's really focused on promoting better plant health, better use of those nutrients, and ultimately better playing conditions on things like an athletic field or a golf course. And so that's the value proposition. I think there's a feel good to having an environmental benefit as a secondary benefit to the product.
Absolutely. And Don, how about you? Your product is certainly eradicating a pesky problem that we have for those of us who travel a lot for work. I'm in hotels often, and certainly it's not something that I want to spend a lot of time thinking about. But in terms of your business model, you talked about producing the sprayers, you talk about producing the chemical. You all seem to have gone down a different path than Hunter and his company have.
Yeah, we were lucky. I mean, we didn't have to pivot in terms of the markets that we were serving because it's an EPA regulated product. So the product itself is pretty strictly controlled in terms of the ingredients. You can't make any substitutions. You can't make any changes in the way it's applied. You can't physically change a word on the label without approval from the EPA, and that could take a year just to get a label change approval. So the product, we were pretty firmly on the formulation, the bottling of that itself. We moved away from manufacturing the spray kits ourselves because we realized we weren't a sprayer company. And so we were able to find a partner to do that. That was a specialist, but now that adds an element of supply chain management and lead times and down payments and cash flow. And I'm expecting 2,000 sprayers to come in here shortly because we had an order from one of the top 3 pest control companies in the United States. And they just doubled their order right before the coronavirus, the country shut down, the globe shut down. And I'm trying to source 3,000 units of things. That was the difficult thing. So in terms of pivoting, it's just being nimble enough to respond to the supply chain needs and changes and set expectations for customers as to when they should actually receive things, the regulatory issues as to where you have state approval or not, because we launched this product with 17 states. And we went to the show, the day before we went to the show, we got our first 50 spray kits. Luckily, we got them the day we got back from the show because that's when our sales started. But we've gone to all 50 states, plus Puerto Rico, plus District of Columbia, and now Canada. So just trying to be able to keep up with those types of changes and responsive to distribution channels and direct sales is a big challenge.
So let's stick with you for 1 second, Don. Aprehend, right now, the question is it sold in grocery stores? Is that an anticipated market, or is it still going to be something that you have to go through a pest control specialist to come in and
yeah, it's sold only to professional pest controllers at this point. When we launched this, we just wanted to make sure that the people that understood how to control bed bugs professionally, because most home treatments don't work, right? And most of the things that you read about in DIY sessions and the backs of magazines and Popular Mechanic, really doesn't work. So we wanted to launch it with the best hope of it having success, and we thought that was through the professional pest control industry. So we're not limited by our EPA registration, but for the near term and the very near future, our business model is through professional use only.
So what I hear you saying is, short of burning your own house down to get the bed bugs out,
Which
go to
people
a
have done.
professional.
Yeah. No, people have burned their houses down trying to combat bed bugs, but definitely get a professional. They know what they're doing.
Absolutely. Other questions that are coming in for Hunter and Matt. Let's go back to you, Hunter. You talked about using your product on golf courses, on athletic turf fields. What other applications are there for your product?
I appreciate you asking that question, Paul. So for us, golf courses has always been part of the strategy to ultimately get to where we know we're going to make a much larger impact. So I always make the joke to investors, if you're really worried about our revenue projections in the turf market, you're missing the point. We're trying to solve a global phosphorus problem, and that really is focused on trying to get our technology to the broadacre crop production market. So that's addressing crops like corn and soy, which we have more than 200 million acres here in the U.S. planted alone each year. And that's really the big source of phosphorus pollution. And these farmers do care about the environment, but to get to that market is a much longer process through rigorous field trials year over year, through engaging some of these large channel partners that are multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporations. And this stuff doesn't happen overnight. So for us, it was a strategy to start selling something immediately today in a high value market that's generating a high margin revenue. That can help finance the company to get us there and help us meet some milestones that allow us to raise the venture capital needed to get there. And then ultimately to be able to unlock kind of the full potential of this technology, the other part of the equation is being able to capture and clean up. And so for us, it's really going out there and targeting as a long-term business plan, being able to capture phosphorus from a wide variety of applications, everything from wastewater treatment to aquaculture to manure, to lakes and ponds, and being able to essentially capture that phosphorus and put that back into the business that we're already proving out, which is ultimately in broadacre crop production.
Excellent. And Matt, how about for you? I know your product started as in response to a personal concussion, but a lot of the focus was on brain injuries. What about other brain-related ailments? I think of folks who are fighting with dementia or Alzheimer's. Is the data that you're collecting able to have an impact on the brain, the brain spectrum, if you will?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a huge, it has applications in almost anything that's related to your brain, which if you think about it is, just about everything. We had to be careful, and this was something early on that we actually even struggled with of not really being sure where to pick and where to focus. Should we go into elder care with the aging population and dementia and Alzheimer's as opposed to concussions, or even ADHD in children? That's another area that we could work on and help. So it definitely has an application in all of those areas. And the way I put it is right now we're dipping our toe in the water for a lot of these. Like we currently work with a nursing care facility in Minnesota that has a couple of our systems and they work with outpatient rehab for a lot of the aging population. It could be for a whole number of different things. So being able to start and collecting a lot of data with them on what is normal, what do we typically see, what are the changes. Because we care about all of these right now, though, we're trying to stay laser focused on sports to really establish ourselves as a company to grow. But ultimately, we care about and really want to grow into those other areas as we continue to develop.
Yeah. You know, when I think of Penn State and I think of our vast and powerful alumni network, I would have to think that there's an ecosystem that's around you, not just in terms of the work that James is doing, but also in terms of other entities that are out there that are supporting the work that you're doing that all have a connection to Penn State. I'll be fully transparent. We are at the Alumni Association an investor in 1855 Capital, and I know that all of you have had a connection with 1855 Capital. Talk a little bit about that ecosystem, whether it's through investor funding with a group like 1855 or other ways that the Penn State community has kind of rallied around your companies.
Yeah, Paul, I'd be happy to take that question. So I think that as you start to cultivate an ecosystem of startup companies and they start to move further in their infancy to starting to commercialize and starting to scale, one of the critical gaps that being located in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, starts to provide is the lack of capital. So it's really easy when you're a startup in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia to be surrounded by a network of investors, whether they're angels or whether they're truly venture funds, to support and start to invest into these companies to watch them grow. And I think that 1855 Capital saw that there was a need, if you're going to cultivate this ecosystem, that next step once you get out of an accelerator is, well, now you need some money to start putting some of these ideas to work. And so I think that for us, that's provided the opportunity not only to get that initial seed funding, but more importantly, to attract bigger investment that's maybe more strategic, more industry specific. A lot of the stats will show that venture capitalists invest within a 90-mile radius of their headquarters. And that's because they like to come in and they like to check in and they like to be able to watch these companies grow before, for years sometimes before they actually start to write checks. And so 1855 has been able to service that need specifically for us, where we've been able to, develop a round of funding where we brought in strategic capital. And now as we go out, they get to be that voice that's been watching the story from day one. And so I think for us, it's been absolutely critical. And I think that that's going to be even more critical as we continue to develop a large pipeline of startups coming through this Penn State ecosystem.
And I'd like to add on there to Hunter, it's for sure 1855 is a critical resource that's recently been added to the local ecosystem, but just the state of Pennsylvania in general, through some of the early programs of designed and developed in PA, were some early stage capital that came through. Research grants, the RAIN grants through Penn State, the different colleges through early. Connecticut got some of those early on from some of the different contests. From the Ben Franklin Technology Partners, which all of us were involved with at some point to get early stage funding, which bridges the gap from the first $5,000 to the next $100,000 to then get to angel or venture or some sales, hopefully. But Pennsylvania has a lot to be proud of in terms of the support of some of these early initiatives, and Penn State has done a lot, especially since President Barron's come on, to really make these resources available. And I don't think any of our companies could have been here without those resources.
Great. Matt, anything you want to add to that?
I would think I would just be echoing the other points, that it's really it's not one particular person or group, it's the community that Penn State has built and the way we want to support each other as part of that. And that through 1855 and Ben Franklin, both investors in Reflection, and more than just monetary, the advice, the guidance that they provide as well is, it's critical to how we've gotten to where we are today.
Hunter brought up a really interesting stat, and that's something that we've heard from 1855 too, is that most venture capitalists want to invest within 90 miles of their headquarters for the reasons that Hunter talked about. How much pressure do you all feel as entrepreneurs move your business to closer where the capital is, right? I mean, certainly Silicon Valley has to be a draw for technology companies, New York City, Philadelphia, other areas, Austin, Texas. I think of areas where there are venture firms that are really strong. What has it been about Central Pennsylvania, or Matt, now you're back home in Lancaster? What is it about Pennsylvania that keeps you here, and that you're confident is going to be the best ecosystem for your startups?
Well, I can quickly add, just for in our case, that it's certainly, I'd say that it's a factor that people do look at where you are, whether they blatantly say it or if it's more just part of who they're monitoring. But one just really big thing to consider is $100,000 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania is going to get you infinitely farther than $100,000 in San Francisco. And I think that investors are starting to recognize that, especially with how much pricing and housing, just general costs have gone up in some of those major metropolitan hubs of where the VCs have tended to be. So that's just something that to keep in mind, that I think they're starting to realize that you don't need to be in San Francisco to be a valuable, potentially a valuable company.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, it's always a challenge. I would say one of the biggest struggles we face, being located in State College, is that I do quite a bit of traveling, and our business being focused both across the US and some international work as well. It can be difficult to be located here, but I can tell you that the quality of living far exceeds some of the locations that both Paul and Matt had mentioned. We can still get out there and we can still attract the capital as long as there's that, home base here to call home. I think it matters a lot to me, being a State College native and being a Penn State alumni, and having leveraged the ecosystem and the resources here so heavily. I think there is quite a bit of value in trying to keep your company here and helping, I would say, continue, I'd say everyone on the phone here leading the path here for what the future of State College becoming an innovation hub really means. And I think, there's pros and cons in general, but we have a university in our backyard that not only has some of the top quality research in the world, but a talent pool that's coming out of there as well for hiring. On top of that, like you mentioned, Paul, the alumni network. I mean, we have 3, large angels that funded our company. And then we have 1855 Capital, who is, all of the investors, all the LPs in that fund are alumni, plus the Alumni Association in the state of Pennsylvania and the university. So it's one of those things where, I think that what we've been catering to here is going to be the future hub of places like this. And I know that James is nodding his head because he's very much motivated to hopefully make this what will become that next Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, Boston, Massachusetts location to come and start and ground your company.
I'll just add one thing. I was on a call with a venture capital firm from Austin on Monday, and this whole COVID stay at home has them completely rethinking their hyper focus on local startup companies. And I really think that coming out of this, the world might be a little bit more flat, and it won't matter if you're in Palo Alto or Lancaster or Bellefonte. Good companies are going to get funding increasingly. So I think there's there's potentially a silver lining for great companies like the 3 that we featured here.
For sure. And I don't want to become Boston or Silicon Valley because I don't want their traffic. I moved here 30 some years ago because it was equally inaccessible when the airport was still a gravel parking lot and a trailer with 2 folding chairs. So it's the big city now.
I know we're up against our time, but I have a couple more questions. Are you guys okay if we keep going?
Sure.
So we've heard a lot of terms thrown out there. We've heard startup, we've heard seed funding, we've heard angel, we've heard venture capitalist. When do you just become a company? Like, when do you stop being a startup and you're just a company now? Talk to me. You guys have been at this now a number of years. Maybe this is a question for James, but kind of, when do you know that you've made it and we're moving forward now?
The term startup has changed, I think, quite a bit. I mean, you can look at, I would say that most people would consider Tesla a startup company.
Sure.
generating a massive loss. I mean, billions of dollars of loss, right? And they're publicly traded on the stock exchange, and people still call them a startup. And I think it might have to do more with the culture and the mission and the path to success. I mean, you think about your GEs and large established companies like that have been around for decades. We don't think of them as startups, but they all started one day and got to that size through being a startup. And I think, you know, we're seeing that venture capitalists, I mean, they're writing hundreds of millions of dollars into some of these companies, and we're still all calling them startups. So I would say it's a loose term, and I don't see being called anything other than a startup for quite some time.
And I
think a lot of it is, I apologize. Go ahead, Don.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I heard a joke once of just someone calling those, you know, something like Uber, which is, you know, over $1 billion company, publicly traded now at this point. And they're a startup with a bad business model because they can't make any money. And I think that profitability is really that big question of what really defines a startup versus what doesn't. But you're right, it is definitely a loose term that has changed its definition recently.
And I think the best place to raise money is from selling things to customers. So the sooner you can get away from relying on outside money and having to borrow. Now, there's always a time and a place for it in terms of trying to get some leverage and, you know, investments and things like that. But, you know, you're a real company when you start selling a product to a customer, in my book. It was like, okay, you can talk about a lot of things and you can have some fascinating research, but if you're not selling a real product to a real customer and collecting money for it, you're not a company, startup, or otherwise.
I would agree.
James, a question for you that some people might not realize, and maybe this is because it's more of a behind the scenes question, but when I asked about metropolitan areas and if there's a pull to those areas for some of these companies, Penn State has actually done a number of things to make central Pennsylvania, you know, desirable in terms of hosting their company here, and talk a little bit about Invent Penn State as it relates to intellectual property and some of our policies around intellectual property. I know are more liberal than maybe other institutions of higher education in terms of who retains ownership of all that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Paul. Going back about 10 years ago, the university assessed its policies for licensing intellectual property, especially in intellectual property that's developed through sponsored research with an industry partner, a private company, like a startup or a large Fortune 500 company. And that's been very helpful in, one, creating relationships with industry that come in. They sponsor grad students. It gets our faculty working on bleeding edge problems. So that's been very helpful, and it also just kind of keeps things flowing. And it's not a grind to work with the university to get intellectual property out and into a company. So Penn State's been very aggressive in its stance of licensing intellectual property. It's had some very progressive approaches and gotten the attention of all the other universities in higher ed because of our friendly approach. So I think you'll find that you know, the last 6-7 years in particular, the university's become very adept working with industry and making sure that the best technologies are licensed and making an impact to society.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. That's all the time we have. I appreciate you staying on for a couple extra minutes and indulging with some extra questions. That's all the time we have this evening. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us. I also want to thank you who tuned in to tonight's virtual speaker series, whether you were on Zoom or on Facebook Live. We really appreciate you tuning in to tonight's program. As a reminder, we'll be hosting more speaker sessions in the coming weeks and months, and you can find out more information about that at alumni.psu.edu/events. Thanks again, and we are
Penn State. Thank you very much, everybody.
See you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.